Hello everyone and welcome back to Pepper's Pages. It has been a while since I've done anything. I believe the last time I posted anything on here was back in March, possibly, and it was just a short. I've been missing doing this, so I had some free time, thought I'd give it a go again. I am so happy to have you back. Today I wanted to go over my 2023 reads. I read 50 in total. The last few years, my goals have been a bit higher. I believe in 21, I read 88 books. Last year I read, 22, I read over 70. It may have been 77, I can't remember exactly. I was going to set a goal of 100 books for 2023, and throughout 22, I was having a really hard time getting through them because it was becoming more of a, how fast can you read this, how fast can you finish it and add another book to your goal? And it just stopped being fun. So what I wanted to do for last year was I set a goal for 50 books, and that was to help me get back into reading as an enjoyable hobby and not just to see how many I could get out at a time. Honestly, I almost didn't reach my goal. I ended up picking up a bunch of short stories towards the end of the year to hit it. I am very proud that I got it though, because I was looking at about 10 short before the end of the year and I was a little upset at myself for it, but we made it and we're here to talk about them today. So the first book of 2023 was The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. If I am mispronouncing her name or any authors from here on out incorrectly, please let me know so that I can fix that. This book was a terrific way to start off the year. At first I had some doubts because it was kind of slow. It didn't seem like something I was going to be interested in, but about halfway through the pace picks up, and honestly I ended up loving it so much that I gave it a 5. It's a really good mystery. You already know who's done it, but it's the build up to the final encounter. I really loved the main character in this. She's searching for her sister. Honestly, I cannot remember character names right now. But she gets tied up with this man that she believes is the perpetrator in her sister going missing, and it just breaks loose. Honestly, the last bit of the book is what really sent it home for me. That final reveal in who he really is, who everyone really is just really fantastically done, I think. The second book for 2023 was a manga. It was Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin Volume 1, and honestly, I'm not even going to try and butcher this name. I'll just put a picture up so you can find them. I got this solely because someone I knew was interested in it and had talked about it all the time, and I ended up picking it up off their recommended shelf. And I enjoyed it. That was my first honest encounter with anything like mech related. I've seen Transformers growing up and things like that. I have not picked up the next volume. I'm interested in doing so, but it may be a little while because my goal for this year is to get through all of the books that I currently own and have not read. But yeah, I ended up giving this one a 5 as well because it was fun, it was action-packed, it was a fast pace, and just fun all the way around, despite some of the themes in it. The third book was Noise by Darin Bradley. I actually found this at the recycled bookstore in Denton, and this is a local author, or an author local to Denton. I don't know if he actually still lives there or not. I don't know anything about him other than this book. So I picked it up because I wanted to try something more local, someone less known, and I was a little disappointed. It had a really interesting concept. Basically, it is these people who live in Denton because the whole book is based in Denton. This group and a bunch of other people in town know that there's about to be mass hysteria, and so they start planning to get out of town, and they've had it planned this whole time. There's a big manual book that these guys have put together. Overall, it just felt like a dude book, and my biggest issues with it wasn't the concept or anything like that. It was the way the characters handled some of the things. It was like Bradley had this really big idea and knew exactly what he wanted, but just didn't quite convey it as well as I would have liked to have seen. I gave this book a 3. I think maybe I was just being a little harsh on it. I wouldn't mind reading it again to give it another go now that I know what I'm going into, but honestly, it just kind of left me wanting more than anything. Next is Christine by Stephen King. This one was a chunk, so I own the book, but I ended up just listening to it because I knew that was something I could not commit to at the time. But it was fantastic. I grew up watching the movie. I've seen it a lot. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite movies, but it is a very well-made movie, and the book follows pretty closely to the storyline. If you don't know what Christine is about, it's this young nerdy kid who finds an old, I believe it was a Plymouth, like a 1950s Plymouth or something, and he takes her in, fixes her up, and essentially becomes possessed by the car. I would say that's probably the best way to put that, honestly. It's terrifying. I loved the final confrontation scene. I like that our main character was pretty helpless, even though like he is the strong character. The position that he was in is not ideal for anybody when you're needing to fight an actual car. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This was a fantastic book. So this book follows Guy Montag, or Montague, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his name. He is a firefighter in a dystopian future where no one is allowed to own books, and instead of putting out fires, the firefighters start them. This is a classic, most people have read it. I am unfortunately one of the few that got to it late. I wish that I had seen this earlier in my life because I think younger me would have just eaten this up and really run with it. Next is Haunted by Chuck Palahnuik. I'm pretty sure I'm saying his name wrong too. I've heard it so many different ways, I'm not sure at this point how to pronounce it. This is a collection of short stories written by Chuck, and the interesting thing about it is that there is a bigger plot where all of these short stories are interlaid into it. It follows a group of writers who have been promised this big getaway to be able to write the novel or script or whatever of their dreams, but under the condition that they have no contact with the outside world for, I believe it was 2 months. Now, a lot of the people brought to this house are not people that you would want to spend extended amounts of time with. For example, it opens up with the short story Guts. If you have not read Guts, you are very lucky. I read that short story for the first time when I was like a sophomore or a junior in high school, and it stuck with me. So when I opened this book and saw that short story, I was like, oh no, that's what we're getting into. But this was my first experience with Palahnuik. I tried Fight Club last year, and honestly it was this year, and I honestly just couldn't finish it. It was just, I don't know what it was about it. I wouldn't mind trying it again, but it just felt weak compared to like his later stuff. I do recommend this book. I gave it a 5, but just a warning ahead of time, a lot of the themes that Palahnuik covers are very intense, and he does not hold back, so I would recommend looking at the trigger warnings or anything like that before you pick it up, because there was a lot in this that was a little bit too intense for me. Verity by Colleen Hoover. Oh my god, okay. So TikTok's been blowing up about Colleen Hoover for years now. I've tried. Verity's the only one I tried with, and it was because I was involved with a book club for a little while, and one of the ladies just raved about it. I've never been so perplexed by a book in my entire life. I think the biggest thing I was hung up on were the bite marks in the headboard. It's just strange. If you don't know what this book is about, it follows a woman who is brought in to finish writing a novel series for a writer who is, I believe, comatose in the book. She ends up falling in love with the husband. It's just a whole thing. It's just drama, basically. I was not big on this book, honestly, and it didn't sell me enough to ever want to read another Coho book. It was good enough for me to finish in about 2 days, because it is one of those that will grip you and like keep you there for the tea, like you want to know what happens in the end. But I didn't like any of the characters. I just didn't care enough, I guess. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I gave this one a 4, and I read it because it's a classic. Everybody's read it. I've watched the movie. Honestly, again, like, I wasn't super impressed with this book. Like, it was interesting to watch these characters fall apart. Not necessarily fun, But I've seen the movie so many times that at this point, like, I know the story, there wasn't anything new to get out of it, and I would prefer to just watch the movie. Oh, okay, I'm excited to talk about Clive Barker. So I've been slowly working my way through the Books of Blood and have been loving every second of it. I think the only one that has been weak to me so far has been the second book, and it's probably because the first one impressed me so much. I was just like expecting more from it and didn't quite get what I was looking for. He's a very intense writer. There are a lot of things that he talks about in them and writes about that is uncomfortable, but it's not to a point that it's like disgusting. I've been reading a lot of his stuff. I believe last year I read 3 or 4 of his books in total, and not one of them really disappointed me, except for that second one, but I believe I read that back in 2021. This collection of short stories, the Books of Blood, they're all really quick, sometimes really gruesome stories. There is one in the first book that was my favorite, and I believe it was called In the Hills, the Cities. That was a really good one. All of my favorites have been from the first book, honestly, but there have been a few from the 4 that I've read so far that have really stuck out to me. I don't want to go too into depth because I do want to do a whole series over the Books of Blood. Dexter in the Dark by Jeff Lindsay. I continue my Dexter obsession. I wouldn't say it's really an obsession. I've been watching Dexter since early high school. I caught the last season on TV as it aired, and even though now it is not good in my opinion, it got me hooked enough to continue watching this series, and now that I've seen it several times, I've been wanting to get into the books. Something that's really funny about that is that the first one I listened to on audio, and Jeff Lindsay narrates it himself, and he pronounces LaGuerta as Lagerta. Just, that grated me so bad. They're great books, they're fun, they honestly deviate quite a bit from the show, and I enjoy that because I feel like I get a whole new story out of it. I think this one may have been my least favorite so far, mostly because Dexter spends half of it just being sad because he can't carry out his hobbies anymore, and he's also like stressing out about getting married to Rita and everything. It just felt like a low point in the series so far. That's the last one I've read as of yet. I do want to finish out the series because, I mean, why not? But that one I think is what kind of put me on a stop of reading them. Oh my gosh. Okay, so in this, Dexter finds out that he's going to be a dad, and there are multiple times where he refers to himself as Daddy Dexter. Oh my god. The first time I saw that, I just lost it. That was just the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. Next we have Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. I've been reading some of Gaiman's stuff for a while. Loved Coraline. I really loved The Ocean at the End of the Lane. That was a horrifying and just perfect read. Those two are for kids' books, Coraline and Ocean at the End of the Lane. Terrifying. Like, obviously, like, I would let my kids read them because they're not inappropriate or anything, but it's just, like, wild to me. Now, the thing with Gaiman is I've enjoyed his kids' books far more than I have his adult ones. I tried to read American Gods a while back and didn't even get a quarter of the way into the book before I was just like... So I read Neverwhere, getting off track, and I ended up giving this one a 3.5. I enjoyed the concept. I liked that they had some like magic mixed in there and things like that. I don't think I was as invested in it as I was expecting to be, which is okay. I mostly bought that book because the cover looked so cool, and I was trying to get into Neil Gaiman, but for now I think I'm just going to stick to his kids' books until something just like hits me. Codename Sapphire by Pam Jenoff. This is a fictional World War II story. This woman is helping transfer people from one place to another in the middle of the war, and this is another one of those I read because one of the ladies in book club is like really, really into historical fiction, and she told me to read this one, so I listened to it, and I thought it was pretty good. It's not my cup of tea, honestly. I'm not really into that kind of genre, but I am glad that I read it. because it does cover a lot of things that I've never really thought about when it comes to like World War II. The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. I saw a poster for Daniel Radcliffe in The Woman in Black a couple of years ago, and I've never seen it, but I knew there was a book and I wanted to read it before I watched the movie. It's terrifying. Just the thought of being alone in a house in the middle of a marsh where there's like some creepy woman walking around, but you can't ever catch her, and you can hear people like screaming in the marsh, like, nah, there's no way. But it was a great book. Fantastic. Absolutely loved it. And I highly recommend it. Another Neil Gaiman story, The Graveyard Book. This one is, I would say it's more of a middle grade story than it is like a kid's book or an adult's book. It takes place in a cemetery where a young boy has lived his life. He can see the dead. And they all have raised him pretty much, and he starts getting curious about the outside world. This was a cute story, as dark as the tones can get sometimes in this book. It was pretty wholesome, and I loved getting to see all of the ghosts in their habitat in the cemetery. It was a lot of fun, but this was a really good one as well. Then we have The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. This was one that I've heard about. I've seen lots of pictures of the cover, and it had always intrigued me, but I didn't really think about it until I saw it on Libby, and I just downloaded it and tore through this book. This follows Jane Lawrence as she meets this young, handsome bachelor who is widowed, and she doesn't actually move into his house. She's not even supposed to be there. He's like acting weird about her coming over. She thinks it's just the house falling apart, but turns out it might have something to do with his wife, who's still like roaming the halls and haunting. It was like a wild story. It didn't quite go the way that I was hoping it would, but it was very different. Honestly, did not follow anything that I was expecting it to. It was just a fun read overall, and honestly, it gave me the heebie-jeebies a few times. Another Clive Barker, The Damnation Game. I really enjoyed this book. This follows a man who has recently got out of prison. He's given the opportunity to be the bodyguard for a rich gentleman. But the longer he stays there, the more he starts to realize like something's not right with this, something's up. He meets his boss's daughter, and turns out she has some like psychic abilities. It gets pretty gruesome, honestly, but every second of it was just incredible. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz. This one, I was walking through Target, spotted it, had to get it because the movie came out and disappointed me I'll say it disappointed me quite a bit. But I wanted to step back into my roots, so I got the first book, reread them, and loved them just as much as I did as a kid. It's amazing how we grow up and we think we've grown out of these things, but as soon as I picked that book up, I felt like I was back in middle school, just starting my horror phase. I'm sure my parents expected that to be just a phase, but no, it's here to stay. Ooh, love me some Junji Ito. We have Remina. I gave this one a 5. This is my favorite Junji Ito book. It follows a girl who has had a planet named after her, and as she's gotten older, she's an adult. I think she's an adult at this point or nearing adulthood, and they realize that the planet that was named after her is coming to Earth, and seems like it's gonna try and eat it. Lots of heavy themes with Junji Ito, lots of really, really intense imagery, but I honestly enjoy everything that I've picked up from him so far. This one got me pretty good. I recommend anything Junji Ito. Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. I'm sorry. This one is a collection of short stories, mostly revolving around the female form, female body, what it's like to be a woman. The first story in this is called The Husband's Stitch. Great way to start off the book. I remember an old horror story about a girl or a woman who had a ribbon around her neck, and when she took it off, it fell off. I was moved by every single story. The only one that didn't really get to me emotionally, but it was fun, was a short story that was based on, I believe, Law and Order and the characters in that, but it gets really trippy. It's like each little paragraph is an episode explaining what's happening in that episode, and it just gets weirder and weirder, and I loved it. Like, I was not thinking that there was going to be anything like that in there, and it just stuck out really well. The Hellbound Heart, I gave this one a 5. I wanted to read this one for so long. Like, I've been looking for it, but the only time I've ever been able to find it was in Barnes & Noble, and a tiny little copy of it was $17 now. So, I happened to go into the recycled books in Denton, and I found a copy, and I was so excited, and I read through that so fast. Oh my gosh. Very close to the film. Honestly, I might prefer the film more, but they're so close that you can't really, like, say, oh, this one was better than the other one. It is fun to see it written out and, like, experience those emotions and things like that through the characters themselves, but I really did enjoy this. Like, I don't know. I was just so excited to finally get a hold of it that I read it in, like, a day or two, I think. The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest. I gave this one a 3.5. It's a self-help book. I'm not one that's really into self-help kind of stuff, but I did enjoy this one. My aunt actually recommended it to me in a time that I needed it, and it did help. I will say that. There were some things that I learned from it, some new ways of coping, new ways of thinking. But if you're not into self-help, or if you're really picky about it, I would look into it first before you read it, because as somebody who doesn't read a lot of self-help, it was good for what it was needed for. Based on a true story by Norm Macdonald. I can't believe I haven't read this one sooner. I love Norm. He was a terrific human, like, just so funny. Obviously I don't know what he was like in real life, but I'd like to think that he was a great person. This one is funny because I was told that a lot of bookstores didn't know whether to put it in the fiction or non-fiction, but what's there to question? Everything in this book is true. Like, hands down. It has to be true, right? Haunted Castles, The Complete Gothic Stories by Ray Russell. This was one that was recommended to me, and I enjoyed it a lot. There were a lot of really good stories in this. Some of them were a little intense, but it was great. The Hobbit, or There and Back Again by J.R.R. Tolkien. I am a huge sucker for The Lord of the Rings. If you know me, if you've watched my videos, I'm sure I talk about it a lot. I read the complete Lord of the Rings trilogy back in 2021 and loved every second of it. But incredible series if you haven't read that one. Because I liked that so much, I wanted to go back and read The Hobbit, because that is the first book of the Lord of the Rings, technically. It is a kid's book. It is written a lot differently. I think that's kind of where I got hung up on it, and that's mostly because I was looking for more of, like, the imagery stuff that's in the Lord of the Rings. More of the character building. It was not bad. I enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoyed this, but I think it was just a matter of, like, I was looking for more of the adult adventure fantasy than I was the kids. I knew this was a kid's book going into it, like, don't get me wrong. I knew what I was in for, but I think I just missed the excessive amounts of descriptions that are in The Lord of the Rings. Dark Water by Koji Suzuki. I love Koji's stuff. Honestly have read Ring, I'm currently working on Spiral, and then I read Dark Water. As a kid, being obsessed with horror, The Ring, mostly the American remake because I didn't know that there were originals back then, was one of my favorite horror movies growing up, next to The Grudge. So it was fun to experience that, but we're here to talk about Dark Water. I'm getting very distracted. So Dark Water is a collection of short stories, which is not what I was expecting. If you have seen I believe it was early 2000s film adaptation with Jennifer Connelly, I believe that's who's in it. It was a terrifying movie to me as a kid, and I was a little saddened that it is just a short story. But overall, this was a fun book. I didn't not enjoy myself. I did give it 3.75. I loved The Ring, and I'm really enjoying Spiral. It is a very different kind of book compared to Ring. Grass by Sherry S. Tepper. Again, if you know me, you know I love Tepper so much. I I read The Fresco a few years ago, adored it, I still do, I recommend it to everybody, it's one of my favorite books. It was a good book, it was fun, I think I would have preferred to have just gone back and read The Fresco again. I've also read The Visitor, and that's another one where siblings fall in love, and I can remember reading that one at the end and just like screaming, because why? This is not necessary and at all, like there's no reason for that, and for them to stay together, oh my god. Anyway, Grass was good. It was very interesting world building. They had a lot of cool animal concepts, I guess you can say that, because they were more mechanical than they were actual animals. Next is Kappa. Again, I am not going to try and butcher this name. I'm just not brave enough to do it. This is a short story in which a man meets a bunch of Kappas and goes to their world and learns what they're like, and then decides whether, or has to decide whether or not he's going to go back to the real world or stay with them. I loved their character designs. They were very small and very funny looking, you know. I just enjoyed this one. It was just kind of out of nowhere read. Just one that was recommended to me, and I was like, okay, I'll try it, and I ended up enjoying it, so. Then we have Hoover Horror and the Supernatural by Saki, which he apparently has another name, but I can't remember at the moment. This was bought for me at a estate sale, and I went through it pretty quickly, honestly. It was a lot of fun, and it had a lot of cool little stories in it. I mean, there's 22 of them. You gotta find something that you like, right? But yeah, I enjoyed this one. It's just a very fast read. I gave it a 4.75. And I may have to pick it up and read it again at some point, just because it was just so fast and enjoyable. Then we have Frankenstein. Oh my gosh, Mary Shelley, what are you doing to me? I read the original 1818 text as a buddy read. I loved it. Honestly, I was expecting a very different kind of story, mostly just like Victor trying to build this thing. I thought that was going to take up most of the book, but instead I've got this really in-depth, like, I guess I would say character study on two very different people. So you have Frankenstein's monster, who was abandoned and left to figure it out for himself. I believe was an inherently good character starting out until he learned what it was like to be angry or vengeful. And then you have Victor, who's just honestly a chicken and ran from his own creation. He didn't even think about the consequences before he started working on it. This is just a great tragedy story. I highly recommend it. I'm interested to delve into this more deeply, because one of the things that we discussed while reading it was, how did people come to the character that we have now, with the green face, the neck bolts, the, you know, all that kind of stuff, when Mary Shelley made it more of a human, you know, where they're just like stitched together, but they look more human than what we have now for Frankenstein. I gave this one a 5. I'll always give it a 5. It was fantastic. I am gonna do a bigger video on Frankenstein and the movies. Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen. This was one that I just found on Libby, and I had it on my TBR for a little while. I wasn't really sure what it was about or anything, and then I found it and I was like, okay, we'll just listen to it. So if you're into mermaids, you're gonna love this story. She essentially works for the goddess that she believes in. I cannot remember names, honestly. But she meets a man who's like drowning in the sea. She saves him and then has to fix what she's done. And I thought it was a really good tale. I gave it a 3.75, and I think it was mostly because it's not my type of genre. Like, I don't usually read that kind of stuff, and so maybe it was just a little lackluster for me. But I thought it was beautifully written. I wish I could remember who narrated that book, because her voice was just the most calming and beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life. Odd Thomas by Dean Koontz. Me and Koontz have had an interesting relationship, mostly because I really enjoyed The Face of Fear. Whenever I first read it, it was a shorter book. The Watchers disappointed me very severely. And then I got to Odd Thomas. I've heard a lot about it. I've always wanted to read it and just never had the opportunity to do so. I'm glad that I finally got into it though. So Odd Thomas is about Odd, who can see ghosts. He has a new character come into town who has a bunch of black figures following them around. So he follows them, finds out they're up to no good, and chaos ensues. I just really enjoyed this. I don't know. I believe that Anton Yelchin played Odd in the movies. Anyway, I gave Odd Thomas a 4.5. I'm thinking about reading the rest of the series, but I don't know yet. I think I just want to watch the movie for now. Then we have A Ghost Story by Peter Straub. This is my first Straub book. It took me about a month to get through it because it was a pretty good chunk, but I absolutely loved that story. It follows a group of 4 older men who have had a pretty rough past. They end up being haunted by what they have done, and it comes back with a vengeance. There's not a lot that I can give on this without giving it away, but it is a nice slow burn story. I loved how it was all built up from the beginning and how it was released at the end. I loved all the characters. I don't know, I was really impressed by this. Oh, here's another Czech Palahnuik. This one was rough for me. This is Snuff. It is about an adult film star. I'm trying to think of how to word this delicately. It is about an adult film star whose goal is to go at it with, I believe, 600 men or people. I think it was just men though. It is an interesting look into that industry. I think some of the themes in this bothered me a bit more than the other shorter stories in Haunted. I'm fully aware that that's how he writes and that he's a very intense person, but this one was just so hard for me to get through. I gave it a 3. I listened to it on audio and it was about 5 hours long, but it still took me about a week and a half to finish it because I could only take so much at a time. It was just hard to get through, and I, again, recommend looking up the trigger warnings anytime you read a Palahnuik book because it can be a lot. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. I gave this one a 3. I give most of the kids' books I read a 3 because it feels unfair to really rate them the way that I do other books. I liked how different this was from the book. That's really all I have to give. Oh, other than the Tin Man lopping off a cat head. I was like, what the heck? That happens twice, I think, where they do something like that. And I was just floored. I was like, dude, I know it's a different time, but it's a kid's book. It just, I think it caught me off guard more than anything. The Books of Blood, Volume 4. Loved it. I'm just gonna breeze past this one because I've already talked about it basically, but I gave this one a 4.75 as well. Then I read Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I've been wanting to read this for a long time. There are some parts in it that are questionable, but I liked seeing Peter as more of a brat than this amazing hero. Everyone's very enamored by him, but in the book they give you more of a clear sense that he's just a bratty kid who doesn't want to do what anybody else tells him to. He lives in Neverland. Does he have to? No. Falling Back in Love with Being Human by Kai Chang Tom. This was another one that I just grabbed trying to rush through my goal for the year, and I'm really glad that I did because stumbling upon this was a very eye-opening and intense experience. It's sad, but also leaves you feeling more uplifted after you're done listening or reading it. It is about being trans in the world today and having to deal with that and be your best self and the experiences that people have to go through. I highly recommend anybody listening to this because it just reached in and got me, honestly. Then we have The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. I've really enjoyed all of Gillian Flynn's stuff that I have experienced so far. I do think that Gone Girl is my top favorite. I watched that the other night and it still holds up so well. Then I really like Sharp Objects. I wasn't that big on Dark Places. The Grown Up was fun. Honestly, if you want a really quick read, I think this was 64 pages, and it's 64 pages, very quick, very fast paced. I enjoyed it. The Turning by Francine Prose. This was just the turn of the screw, but reimagined and made a little more modern. It felt more like the plot for Bly Manor than it did The Turning of the Screw, but intermingled with each other. I don't exactly know if that's where Flanagan got this idea for, but I enjoyed it. It was nice. I gave it a 3.5. I think that I would have preferred to just read Turn of the Screw again, but there were a lot of things in this that were fun. Then we have The House. It's a Mason Falls Mysteries by Raylan Drake. This is a middle grade mystery book. It's just kids solving a crime. Honestly, it was just fun. Then we have Nestlings. Oh my god, I cannot wait to talk about Nat Cassidy. Okay, so a year or two ago I read Mary, which is Cassidy's debut novel. For a debut novel, holy I've not had a book give me nightmares since I was a kid, honestly. But at night I would just turn off my light and be so scared that I would like open my eyes and one of the ghosts with a pillowcase over her head would be there, and it's just like, oh, it was so good. But I loved that book because it touched on topics of menopause, of growing older as a woman, mental illness. It just was packed full of things that I was not expecting, especially written by a man. But I do appreciate that he did, you know, like, I don't know. I don't feel like him being a male really like took away from it at all, because it legitimately felt like Mary was telling you all of this and not him trying to like make himself seem bigger for knowing this stuff. Anyway, Nestlings. So this book follows a woman who's paraplegic. She's just had a baby. She's got severe postpartum depression. Her and her husband had put their names into a random lottery for this apartment complex that's like known more for the 1%. They move in, things start to go crazy, and honestly, I've never read Rosemary's Baby, but I've seen the movie, and this is what it felt like, except it was like very different. But anyway, Nat Cassidy, new author, well, fairly new author, really great. I highly recommend picking up Mary or Nestlings. Honestly, I would say if you're going to start with Cassidy, go with Mary, because I've never experienced anything like that in my life. Then we have The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. This one was recommended to me as well. I listened to it on audio. Another one of those just like trying to meet my goal, and I'm glad that I read it because this is a really good short story. We have another short story, The Smile at the Foot of the Ladder by Henry Miller. It was just like heartwarming in a way, in a sad kind of way. It's just a mix of emotions. I don't really know how to explain it other than that. It's a man who used to be a clown and finds his opportunity to help another man become the best clown. And I won't give it away, but it's interesting. We have The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I gave this one a 5 as well. This was another short story, very quick read. It's another one that has just 64 pages in it. It follows a woman who has traveled to another city. It's like a older like period piece, I guess you could say that. She becomes obsessed with the wallpaper in a room that she's pretty much been locked in for days. It's not like she's locked in there. She just stays in her room because she's sick. And it gets really weird. She starts seeing shapes in the walls. Like I said, she becomes obsessed with it. It was just a very interesting read. Then we have Hatchet by Gary Paulsen. I gave this one a 5 as well. I don't know that I'll read any of the other books from Brian's saga. I'm not sure yet, but I've heard a lot of people talk about this, especially reading it in school, and it was never one that was given to me in school, so I wanted to experience it. If you don't know what Hatchet is, it follows this kid who is on an airplane that crashes, and he ends up in the wilderness. I believe it was 45 days. I may be wrong, but he has to take care of himself and try and find help. It was just honestly kind of a stressful story, but that could have just been me, but it was fantastic overall. A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I gave this one a 3.75. I think it's mostly because after reading The Hollow Places, I was expecting something like a lot more like dark and twisted, you know. This is my second experience with T. Kingfisher. It does not ruin it at all, and I do want to continue reading her books. But this one was I won't say this one was a shorter story because it is 247 pages. But essentially this girl moves back into her mom's house. They start experiencing paranormal things happening, and it just gets really weird. I don't want to give too much away about it because it's the fun of it, you know? Then we have The Body by Stephen King. I gave this one a 4.5. I really enjoyed this story, honestly. Like, just getting to watch these kids, like, go on their mission and, like, slowly start to... So, I understand that they know about death. The main character is very familiar with it. But the other kids, like, just their slow realization of, like, life, like, what they're doing out there, that it's not a game, what they're doing. I don't know. I just really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters and how they interacted with each other. And that pie eating contest was just a riot. Oh my god. I was told that I would know, like, when I got to that certain point, like, I don't know, I just wasn't expecting that amount just in the middle of this book, another short story within it, and just, I don't know, it was wild. I finished the second to last Unfortunate Events books called The Penultimate Peril by Lemony Snicket. Try saying that 10 times fast. This one was fun. It takes place in the hotel where they're supposed to meet up with the rest of the secret organization, and you know, things get wacky. Elevation by Stephen King. I didn't realize how much Stephen King I read last year. This one was fun. I had an idea of what was happening in the beginning when he's talking to the doctor, but it didn't take away from the experience. Getting to see that final moment and see him go, I don't want to give it away, but I don't know. It felt like, I've never read Thinner, but it's what I imagine Thinner is like, but with a twist on it. And finally, we have the last Clive Barker book for the year, and that is The History of the Devil, and I gave that a 5. I'm going to reread this one physically because the copy I found on Libby for it was a performance, which I really loved. The man who plays Lucifer, he had the best voice for that, honestly. It was very charming, very smooth. I've seen him in things like Trick or Treat, which I adore that movie too. There were several other really big names in there that I can't remember just off the top of my head. But essentially the story is just Lucifer decides he wants to get back into heaven. And the only way he can do that is by having a trial and to explain his side and show that he is ready to enter the gates of heaven again. And it's just like smaller stories inside of that showing his influence on the world throughout time. I don't know. I think what made me really, really enjoy it was the voice acting in it. That's why I want to read it again physically and see if it still holds that same energy that I got from it. So that was all 50 books that I read last year. I know this video is a bit longer. I'm excited to see how this year goes. I currently have the same goal of 50 books as I did last year because I want to continue enjoying what I'm reading and actually processing it instead of just rushing through to get that number in my app, which I currently am using Storygraph. I've been using that for a while. I like it way more than Goodreads. But all these books were good. I'm really surprised that this year I didn't have one that just, oh man, it's like Mermaids in Paradise. I was really hoping I wouldn't have another one of those. I'll quit rambling now. I hope you all have a great day, an even better week, and until next time, happy reading.